What's up, everybody? Jeremy Gerard from Mythic Customs here with one of my short customizing tutorial videos. Today's video is going to actually be more of a frequently asked questions video. Specifically, I want to talk about the scale of Mythic Legions figures. So this is a question I see a number of people asking, especially people that are newer to the line and newer to customizing, where they're asking about how the different scales of Mythic Legions figures fit together, both for customizing and perhaps just for display. There are a number of different scales within the Mythic Legions line, so I thought it would be helpful. I brought them all out here, or at least all the ones that are currently available for sale. I brought them out here, figured it would be good to go through them, talk about the different sizes, and kind of tell you what goes with what the compatibility will be. So going back to the very first Mythic Legions wave from 2015, that wave is commonly called Mythic Legions 1.0. This was the wave that was produced, that was funded through the original Kickstarter campaign. The figures that were released in that line, that included barbarian style figures, that included skeletons, demons, it included knights, it included dwarves. All of those figures are typically what are called the 1.0 size, and all of their body parts work together. So something like we have here. So this is the Barbarian Legion Builder. This is a 1.0 size, as is this skeleton here. So this is Scapular, the Crypt Breaker. So these two are essentially the same size. All of their body parts will work together. You could swap not only their armor pauldrons and their heads, you could pop the arms apart, you could pop the lower legs apart, the upper legs, all of them will work together. The port system on these two types of characters are exactly the same. Interestingly, if we look at a dwarf from that same wave, this is Bothar Shadowhorn. Bothar stands a lot shorter than the Barbarian does here, but all of the parts from a dwarf figure are also considered 1.0. Really, the main difference, the way that you get the difference in height, is the legs. So if you look at the legs, if you compare the upper legs on the barbarian or the knight figure, even the skeleton, they're much longer than the short legs that you get on a dwarf. Both the upper legs are dramatically shorter, but the lower legs are shorter as well, as are the gauntlets. Those hand pieces are a little shorter as well. So the ports system totally work, to the point that if you look, these characters actually have the exact same head. The only difference, besides the color, are the helmet attachments. Those removable horn pieces, they're different on the two. But that is the exact same head, the exact same sculpture that is being used on these two bodies. So those are all examples of 1.0 size figures. Other examples would be a lot of the knights that have come out, a lot of the male knights. I've got an orc here. So this is an orc from a later wave. This is actually Vorthog from the Erethyr wave, but this is another example. The orcs, or the male orcs at least, are all 1.0. So that's going to be the first size scale that you see. Now, the next scale that we got is commonly referred to as 2.0. So a few waves into the line, a few years into the line as well, we got another Kickstarter for a wave called Advent of Decay. Advent of Decay introduced more slender characters, females, elves, and it also introduced goblins. All of those use what are called the 2.0 size build. So I'm going to show you one right here. So I have an elf. So this is the Elf Ranger, and you can see it stands a little bit shorter than the barbarian, and the limbs are definitely much more slender. Now, these two builds, these two kinds of figures, are generally not compatible with each other. There are some parts that you could swap between the two. For instance, the shoulder pauldrons, the size of the ports in the back are exactly the same. So you can actually plug 1.0 pauldrons into a 2.0 body. It could do vice versa. The problem is these 2.0 pauldrons are smaller, so while the peg and back fits, they don't tend to clear the shoulders. So Really, when you're kind of talking about compatibility, you're more talking about using a 1.0 part, like the lower, like the foot or the armor on a 2.0. You're going to end up with an oversized look, but maybe if you're doing like a goblin, that looks kind of cool. On that note, let's look at goblins. Goblins are another size that was introduced in the Advent of Decay wave. If I compare a goblin to an elf here, he's a lot shorter, but similar. This is a similar aspect, a similar concept to what we just saw with the dwarves. The dwarves and the rest of the 1.0 all work together. The way the dwarves are shorter is because of those shorter legs. Goblins work the same way, but with the 2.0. All of the ports are similar. The arms work the same. Actually, the arms are identical. You know, those upper arms are exactly the same on these two figures. It's the lower legs, the upper legs that are a lot shorter to get that goblin size. If I compare, say, a goblin to an orc, this is a 1.0 orc, you can see considerably shorter. These parts, all the 2.0 parts will work with other 2.0 figures. We've also got the females. So here's a female knight. This is Hadriana from the Aether wave, and this is an elf. And you can see they're very, very similar. In fact, these two characters have the same upper legs. They have slightly different lower legs, same size, just different sculptures. So all of the female parts are very, very similar to all of the male 2.0 elf parts and stuff like that. More slender characters. So that's what we got with 2.0. Now, you can make some broad kind of assumptions across the line. All of the female figures are 2.0, at least at this point. Maybe down the road we'll get like, something that's 1.0, like a heftier, heavier female. But right now they're all 2.0. All the goblins are not 2.0, however. There are some goblins like Gonks that is on a dwarf style body. So technically that body, as well as the deluxe Goblin Legion builder, those are on 1.0. So you can't just by race say, every one of these characters is 1.0 or 2.0. For instance, I showed you that Scapular the Crypt Breaker, that skeleton here. That is on the 1.0 body. This is the skeleton soldier that came out in Advent of Decay. This is one that actually came with two torsos. It came with a female chest and it came with this chest here, which could technically be male or female. But this is on a 2.0 build. So all of these parts would work with the females and the elves. A little bit shorter stature, definitely thinner than the 1.0 skeletons. So my point is, you can't always just say across the board any specific race is a 1.0 or 2.0. Same thing with vampires. There are 1.0 size vampires like Carpathius and Baron Valagar. There are 2.0 size vampires like the Vampire Knight. So you got to think about that. It's really the build of the body itself. Now, another size that we're going to look at that we got after 1.0 and 2.0 is what they call ogre scale. As you can imagine, there are ogres in ogre scale, but not only that. There's half giants, there's a cyclops. They are considerably larger. So if I compare, let me see, my barbarian, if I compare the barbarian to the ogre, you can see ogre is much larger. And if I go all the way down to goblin, you can see that ogre just absolutely dwarves the goblin size. Much, much larger. Now, these parts are so oversized, they're not going to work compatibility-wise with any of the other type of scales. These are so much larger that there is no crossover. You can certainly combine ogres with each other. Like all Mythic Legions figures, or I should say most Legions figures, these are completely modular. Their heads pop off, their limbs pop off. I'll pull a limb out here. So you can swap these parts amongst other ogres, but the scale itself is not going to be usable with other figures. The last size that I have here on the table is the biggest of the wave, the biggest of the line. These are the trolls. So, like the ogres, the trolls are not compatible with anything else. And actually, the trolls are the only figure in the line, the only scale in the line that's not really meant to be super modular. The heads do pop off on the newer all-star trolls. So the original forest troll, the original stone troll, those heads were not meant to be removable. They didn't come with extra heads. When they reissued both of those figures as part of All Stars 3 and All Stars 4, they came with alternate heads. So the head system had to be rethought so they would be easily removable. That is really the only part. You can pull the other pieces off. I'm not going to lie. I have broken down a troll completely, but the only thing you're going to be able to swap it with is other troll parts that are the same parts, different colors. So there's really not a lot of reason to break a troll down. These are just going to pretty much be super awesome as is. There is one scale that I don't have here because, quite frankly, they're not released yet. There's another scale somewhere between 1.0 and Ogre called a brute scale. The first instance we ever saw of brute scale is on the centaur figure that's from the upcoming Alithia wave. So Aspherius, the centaur in that uses the lower half of a horse, and it's really similar to, it's the same build as the other horses in the line like Balius, but the upper torso is a whole new piece, a whole new scale. When the studio was planning out that size, originally they were going to use Ogre, but the Ogre was a little too big. Then they were going to use 1.0, it was a little too small, so they had to come up with a compromise that was just right. That introduced this brand new scale. So on Aspherius, it's only an upper body, right? Because the lower body is the horse. But in the Paxis wave, we got Tharnog, the orc shaman, and we got Kalazair, the djinn. Both of those use that full brute build. They have legs on them. So that is going to be a new scale. We don't have them in hand yet, so I'm not sure what the compatibility is going to be with other type of scales because they are somewhere between ogres and 1.0. I don't know if the parts like ogres are only going to work within their own size category or if there's going to be any compatibility, but that would be another size to be aware of as well. So as a quick recap, the basic sizes you're looking at, there's the 1.0 figures, which were some of the earlier ones that got done. Now, they're still releasing 1.0 size figures today, right? In the Paxis wave, the Wizard Zende is a 1.0 size figure. That's a brand new figure that's not even out yet. In the Alithia wave, the Vampire Valak is a 1.0 size figure. Even Varg, that vampire type creature, is a 1.0 dwarf size stature figure. So even though the 1.0 wave came out first back in 2015, it's not like they've retired that because there's now 2.0. They're just different sizes. Those 1.0, 2.0, those are honestly labels that fans and customizers have more put on the figures than any designation of this is the first version, which we retired to do an updated version. That's not the case at all. It's not like software where once they start selling the 2.0 version, the 1.0 is obsolete. Not it at all in Mythic Legions. So 1.0, those are going to be your male knights, your barbarians, kind of the bulkier figures. 2.0, those are going to be your more slender figures, elves, female characters, goblins, the short stature. That's what you're going to get for those. Then you've got your ogres, you've got your trolls, and you've got your upcoming brute scale. Those are the different scales. In general, you're going to be able to swap parts within any of those scales. There might be some minor crossover you can do, as I mentioned, between like 1.0 armor on a 2.0, but it's few and far between. For the most part, you're going to do 1.0 parts with 1.0, 2.0 with 2.0, etc. There is actually an article on Source Horseman that covers scale in Mythic Legions, and it's got this cool picture. I'm going to share this photo with you right here. I think it's worth taking a look at. This is one of the photos that's in that article. This actually shows a scale of a lot of different figures. You can see the ice troll in the back there. You can see the ogre that's in front of them. And then laid out there, we've got, a minotaur, a demon, a knight. We've got a dwarf and the goblin. There's a female. This is all of the figures that exist now. The only one not represented is the brute scale I mentioned. We've got all those different scales here. This is a good photo that shows them all kind of side by side. So you can see, from a display standpoint, if you wanted to put these on a shelf, the kind of variety that you would get, which I think is really cool. I love the fact that when I put these on display, a character that should be larger, like an ogre or a troll, certainly is much larger than some of the other figures in the line. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully this video has helped clear up any questions you may have about the different scales of Mythic Legions figures and which parts can go with which parts. If you find videos like this useful and enjoyable, please let me know by giving the video a like. If you have any questions or comments, hit me up in the comments. I'm always willing to answer those. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so you'll be notified whenever I put content like this online. Until next time, I can't wait to see what you make.